Yeah, lovely to welcome everybody. Really good to see you all here today. So welcome to this conference call looking at organising civil society during the current crisis. Yeah, so we've got a good agenda for you this afternoon. And have we done all the housekeeping stuff, Pete?
I did do the housekeeping, but it's good to remind people. So
lovely. No, that's great. So yeah, hopefully you've seen all of the housekeeping things. You'll be muted while we start this call together. But there'll be opportunities to interact a little bit later on, and there's some question and answer sessions and stuff like that, which will be great. So
so shall I say a bit, for some of you, Juliet's going to say a bit about where this has come from, but
yeah.
For some of you, you won't necessarily be members of Citizens UK, many of you will be, but it's obviously a big welcome to all of you, whether you're a member, an existing member, somebody who's thinking about becoming a member or a non-member. And many of you will know Citizens as an organisation that is good at campaigning, and you will have heard of the Living Wage campaign, and recently that campaign that was set up and started by Citizens just managed to get to £1 billion of money into the pockets of some of the poorest people in the UK. That was a campaign that Citizens has led on, and it's an incredible achievement. You'll also have seen just recently in the news that there's been a 6% pay rise due to the government adoption of the national living wage as well. So there's been a huge work on low pay that Citizens have gathered, have kind of organised around. But what some people might not know is that actually that campaign started in churches and faith groups, at the back of churches and the back of mosques and the back of synagogues, with people talking about what were the issues that families were facing. And the thing that came up time and time again was that they couldn't put food on the table, and a group of leaders across Citizens thought we should start this campaign, which was called the Living Wage. So really, in a way, Living Wage is about the church, it is about faith, our faith communities, and that same mission that brought about the living wage brings us here today to think about how we're responding to this crisis. This call is not going to solve all of your problems about technology, but we hope it begins a conversation for you and other people in your community about what you can do and how you can use technology. It will also be the first in a series, so there'll be more of these, and at the end we'll let you know a bit about that. Juliet.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Pete. So both Pete and I have been involved in churches for a long time. I'm a Baptist minister, have been for nearly 25 years, and have been involved in various urban churches and through pioneering work with many denominations through an organisation called Urban Expression. But the last couple of years I've been a community organiser with Citizens UK based in Essex. And I just want to frame things a little bit for us as we begin things here this afternoon. So Citizen UK's vision is of a healthy democracy with civil society at its heart. And I guess when that mission statement was written, we probably never really anticipated that the word healthy would feel such a vital part of that sentence. But it's really significant at the time, at the moment, isn't it? Alongside that vision, we have a threefold mission. It is to build the capacity of people to participate in public life and take action for the common good. Secondly, it is to strengthen the institutions of civil society, so to anchor organisations such as churches with deep roots in our communities that play a crucial mediating role in democracy. And thirdly, to campaign against social injustice and create systemic change in our communities. And it feels that that mission is really relevant at the moment. Our communities at this time are going to need lots more effective citizen leaders in the coming months as the statutory agencies become stretched and vulnerable people start to fall through the cracks. Our civil society institutions are facing the challenge of staying relevant whilst moving their activities online. And community methods blended with digital tools can help us to do that. And the political upheaval that's being caused by the coronavirus at the moment throws up challenges to social justice, especially to those already socially and economically oppressed, denied power, agency or connection, and living on the margins of society. So As a team, we are disorganising and reorganising ourselves over the next few months so that we can continue to build civil society by helping our member institutions to better live out their own vision and mission, and to help them work out how to operate their day-to-day activities in the context of a lockdown and continue to act for social justice. The things that we can help you to do are to strengthen your institution, perhaps as you move your local community's activities online, to develop community leaders so that can serve the wider community at this particular time, and thirdly, to take action for social justice, to help us to think about how to run campaigns to protect the poor and the marginalised locally. So if you're a Citizens member, and if today provokes some more ideas from you, then contact your local Citizens organiser who's going to be ready and willing to help with you as we explore that. To be true to our vision of a healthy democracy with civil society at its heart, we should not be stepping back at this time. Now is the time for civil society to step up. And this conference collaboration today is one way for us to step up and do that together. So Pete, do you want to explain the agenda for us?
Yeah, thank you so much for that, and a great reminder of who we are and why we're here, and why so many of you, I think, have joined this call. We've got 237 of you here. I can't possibly read out all of those names, but welcome to all of you. And if you've just joined, a welcome. And a reminder of the kind of ground rules, and also that I've just put the agenda back into the main chat. If you haven't joined Zoom before, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see there's an opportunity to a chat function. If you open that, you can put questions in there. And you can make comments as well, and you can also private message people. So if you want to message somebody privately about something, you can do that as well. We're going to crack on. Obviously, the bulk of today's meeting is to hear both from is to hear from Facebook and the head of global faith for Facebook, and we're excited to hear that. But before that, we thought it was important to set the scene with some of our leaders talking about their response and some of their thoughts. And so I would like to welcome Deborah from Finchley Reform Synagogue. I'm going to ask that you try and stick to 2 minutes. Juliet's going to be our timekeeper. Those of you who've been to Citizens meetings before will know we're pretty hot on time. So you'll get a noise. What sort of noise is it going to be, Juliet? Is it just shrieking? Is it There we go. So you'll hear that, and if you could try and wrap up at that point as well. So over to you, Deborah, for the first of 3 brief reflections.
Hi. So I was asked to share some thoughts on what it means to move a community online. And there was a teaching from the sage Rabbi Hillel that really has been with me over the last few weeks. He taught in Hebrew, Al tifros min hatzibur, do not separate yourself from the community. And I think in that teaching, we also find the location of a lot of pain at the moment. The physical separation from community doesn't need to mean separation from community. The structures online that once served as digital outposts for us have instead become containers for our community. And that means it might be okay to work with what we had, but I'm really aware that we have had to add new spaces and transform others to meet the needs of different communities. And I think more than anything, it forces us to ask why we do what we do, and how the way we do things needs to change in order to meet our aims when some of what we usually do becomes impossible. We have to work harder to replicate things that we take for granted when we can see each other. Things like welcoming, curating, reaching out, and responding. And for instance, when we do things like pray, we might normally welcome people or take for granted that people know that they've been seen when they arrive. And when we pray by live stream, we have to do everything differently. I also think that we need to acknowledge that everybody feels different levels of comfort with the internet, and that we have to walk alongside our members and bring them with us. And in doing that, establish new norms of behavior and interaction in a place where people feel more disinhibited than they do when we're in person. So we're holding people in a whole number of ways. We're holding them ritually. We're doing things like mourning and burial online in a way we've never done before. And we're also providing consistency by maintaining community spaces even when people can't be there in person. I think this is a crisis and an opportunity. And for us, the most important ideas are being experimental, open-minded, brave, and I think above all, caring. We need to be kind to ourselves as leaders. This is a crisis, and we can only do our best, and we're going to make mistakes. But people need each other, and they need us. And the things that we do, especially in holding life cycle, are too important to do nothing.
Thank you, Deborah. That was a brilliantly thoughtful reflection, and Juliet may want to have a follow-up question in a minute, but I'm going to invite Bishop Roger Morris, who's the Bishop of Colchester, to share a couple of minutes now. Bishop Roger, are you there?
I am here, yep. Just firstly to say something about the need of why we need to be organised, and then secondly to give an example of what we've done. Basically, there are two pressures at the moment. There's an increased demand upon some of the statutory services, but also reduced workforce due to illness and self-isolation. So the statutory authorities need civic society. They need volunteers, they need effective communication, and they need to ensure that government messaging is reaching all the communities in a diverse area. But also, they need to hear back from communities as to how people are being affected. And the statutory authorities do not have the capacity to relate to a disorganised civic society. So, for example, in the execution of the emergency plan, which is where we're at the moment, there's something in Essex called the Essex Resilience Forum that works with a strategic coordinating group. And I've been asked by the Chief Constable to be part of that group to represent faith groups and to look at community cohesion. And what that means effectively is that through me, they've outsourced the task of getting in touch with faith groups and getting those faith groups organised. And they need it, for example, with bereavement support, because by next week, we will need a coherent way of contacting those who can offer bereavement support so the referrals can be made, but also how some of the regulations will affect different faith groups. So how we treat the body of the deceased, for example, becomes quite an issue. And I have found that it's the links I've made through citizens that have been crucial at this time of contacting people and coordinating some of those links. So that's something about the need. And then just quickly, something about a good example of how civic society and so on can be organised, and actually was organised by the local authority who used social media to enable that point of contact. In the early days of the COVID-19 outbreak, as restrictions began to come into force, the head of strengthening communities for Essex County Council worked with the administrators of various local community Facebook groups to create something called Essex Coronavirus Action, which is a Facebook page designed to be a source of reliable information. It's got all the blue ticks from Facebook as a validated and secure information source. But it's also a way of mobilizing volunteers, and they're using something called the Tribe Project, which is provided by Bronze Labs as a secure app that sits within the Facebook platform and is able to confirm if volunteers are DBS checked or not, and can also rapidly process DBS checks. So it's become for Essex the key way of mobilizing volunteers to do all sorts of things, particularly to look after those who are in category A, those who are the most vulnerable, who aren't able to go out and who need provisions brought to them and so on.
Brilliant, thank you so much for that. Great to hear some of the work that you're doing, and as well some interesting and practical advice as well there. Finally, we're going to hear from Sheikh Nuru Mohammed, who is from Birmingham Citizens. Sheikh Nuru, over to you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I think the current situation is a reminder that we should not forget our past. I think God Almighty, out of His wisdom, has taken us back to how Islam was practiced in the early days. Spirituality during the early days of Islam was practiced in the families and within, the comfort of our houses. There was no mosque during that time. People used to practice in their own corners. And this doesn't suggest that mosque is not important. It's no doubt integral part of our faith. But then we take solace from the humble beginning of the religion of Islam. In fact, the first mosque which was built in Islam was during the migration of the Holy Prophet to the holy city of Medina. So while we are thinking of leveraging technology to sustain our organizations and communities, I think it's very important in doing so not to forget the plight of the needy within societies, whether Muslims or not Muslims. We need to remember there are many people within our neighborhood who are in need of us. I just want to take this opportunity to share a story that we came across here in Birmingham. You know, as Birmingham citizens, we've been organizing to look at how 471 homeless families are treated. And we've been calling on the local council to at least build 471 social rent homes as part of the Commonwealth investment. During our listening campaign last week, we came across a powerful story from a mom who was a victim of domestic violence from her husband. This lady could not manage to secure a refuge because she had teenage sons, but rather she managed to get B&B, emergency accommodation. And this lady who is in B&B accommodation during this difficult situation, she refused to be stuck in a crowded room with her kids in the middle of nowhere, fending off the virus in isolation. So she took a decision, and this decision definitely will make her and her family unsafe. So her hope and prayers is that her husband does not return and he follows the instruction of the police. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to all three of you for your wise and valuable contributions there. Student Rabbi Deborah, I was really struck by what you were talking about, creating new containers for community and how we transform spaces, whether they are physical or online. And Bishop Roger, really struck by what you were saying about the statutory authorities needing civil society at this time. Just real opportunities for new partnerships seem to be cropping up everywhere. Real opportunities they're born out of the need that we are witnessing. And Sheikh Nuru Mohammed, thank you so much for the reminder there about not forgetting our past and remembering that whilst digital resources might be really useful, that our faith is born in homes and in families and on the move, and it's survived times like that in the past, and no doubt it will survive times like that again in the future. So thank you all of you for your contributions there. We are going to move on now, and we're delighted to have Jonathan Helliwell with us today. He is the Special Advisor to the Prime Minister for Faith Communities, and we're really looking forward to building a relationship with you, Jonathan, and seeing what we can do to work together for the better of our country at the moment. And we're grateful that you're here with us to provide a bit of an update on the situation for us. And you have five minutes, and welcome. Yeah.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Hi, everybody. And just say it's great that Citizens UK have organised this. I'm very impressed. I'm Christian myself, so I know very much how many of churches, but also other faith groups, what they're doing during the present crisis, and also generally how much they contribute to civil societies. Wanted to say a few things. First of all, I think that the most useful thing all of you can do is three particular things. Firstly, look out, you know better than I do, better than the government does, who are vulnerable people in your local community because of your local knowledge. And I'm not talking about necessarily those people who've been sent, those 1.5 million people who've been sent letters by the NHS already saying stay at home for 3 months, but the kind of people who don't fall into that category of high medical need, but are just generally a bit vulnerable. What you can do is really helpful is to look out for those people, call them, keep in touch with them, if necessary, take them food, parcels, obviously, whilst observing social distancing. That is fantastically helpful because it massively relieves the strain on those people then potentially having to go into hospital or getting involved in services in other ways. So look out for the most vulnerable. Secondly, encourage people in your communities, in your churches and other faith groups, and to stay at home. I mean, generally, I think when looking at the advice that the police and others have provided, people are abiding by the guidelines well. There are occasional examples of places of worship staying open, which frankly, if you come across that, you should really encourage them strongly to close. We need people to stay at home to keep the virus from spreading. The third thing, which we're really keen to encourage you to do, is to look out for local charities. And again, you'll know who those are better than we do necessarily. I mean, lots of your churches and other groups will be already supporting some of these local charities. They are really facing big cash flow problems at the moment. And we're looking as a government at what we can do to support charities. But you will have existing relationships with them, and anything you can do to encourage your members of your congregations and supporters to look out for those groups which might be helping young people. Hospices, for example, are really struggling at the moment because a lot of the shops, charity shops they depend on, are closed. So they've basically lost a large amount of their fundraising ability. Anything you can do to help those charities is fantastically helpful. As I say, we're looking at that as well as a government, but anything that you too can do that. And as I say, you will know better than we do which are those local charities that are struggling. I know there'll be lots of questions that you have for the government. There isn't time now to go answer those in detail, but if maybe some of the guys from Citizens UK could collate those and send them to me afterwards, I'm really happy to answer them in detail if that's helpful to you. I'm sure you're probably more interested to hear from the guys from Facebook than you are from me. So over to you.
Thank you so much for that, Jonathan, and thank you for joining us. And as Juliet said, excited to work with you as the crisis unfolds, but also over time as well through Citizens UK. And a good reminder of those kind of three things: looking out for the most vulnerable, encouraging our faith groups to stay at home, and also looking out for some of those smaller charities that are really struggling. And I know and have heard stories already of some incredible acts of kindness from some of your faith communities in supporting those. We're going to move on to Facebook now. I'm just going to remind you of if you for whatever reason can't see the speaker who's speaking, you need to on your Zoom you need to put it to the speaker view. So make sure you've got it onto the speaker view, because there's about 10 screens. So you might be on one of those, but if you want to see the speaker, put it on speaker view. And the function to do that is in the top right hand corner of Zoom. So I encourage you to do that. If you do have a question at any point that's related to this or other things, if you put your hand up, so there's a reaction thing in the bottom right where you can put thumbs up or a clap, and hopefully one of the people from Citizens who's helping to monitor what's going on here will see that hand up and will be able to privately message you so they can answer that. As we invite Facebook, there will also be an opportunity at the end of this to have a Q&A, and the way that we're going to do that is if you could put your question into the chat, and then Juliet and I are going to try and pick out some of those questions and get you to answer them as well. So enough of me. I'm going to hand over to the Facebook team. Just as an introduction, it's great to have Nona here, who's the global head of faith-based partnerships for Facebook, and it's brilliant that you've joined us. And of course, an old colleague, George Gabriel, who is the strategic partnerships manager community at Facebook. It's worth saying that Nona obviously has got her own personal experience in ministry and will be speaking about this from her own perspective, but also I'm sure the principles will be valuable to all of us. So I'm going to hand over to them now.
Joe Cortis.
Join the meeting.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. George, did you want to make any introductory comments before I get started? I think it'd be great since you've helped to marshal this opportunity for us. I'm so glad to be here.
Sure. Thanks, Nona. I mean, just a very quick hello to everyone. Lots of familiar faces on this call. And I guess there's nothing like a crisis to remind you of the people who matter to you and why they matter to begin with. So really excited to be able to draw on old relationships at a time like this to help make something useful happen. So yeah, we're very pleased to be able to kind of support you in the extraordinary work I know all of you are doing across the country. And yeah, delighted to be able to pull in Nona, who's got stacks of expertise and hopefully some useful tools and tips that can help you stay connected with those you're serving over coming weeks and months. Over to you, Nona.
Awesome. Thank you so much, George, for pulling this together. I want to verify that you can see my screen. So one moment. All right. Let me know. Oh, wait. Later. Okay. It's like asking me to update all these fun things. Okay. Let me know if you can see this. Keeping the Faith on Facebook?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. So I am so passionate about this, and I want to thank everyone who has already shared thoughts on this subject, how we stay connected to our faith through this very trying time, and the role that we all play as leaders. As was said earlier, I myself, I don't just work for Facebook. My husband and I also pastor a church together in Florida here in the United States. So very near and dear to my heart. Before I even get started, I was reading through the comment thread, and I know there were a couple questions about, you know, should this online thing kind of be a container until we get back to normal life? And there were some other questions about, you know, well, how much weight should we give to this? Allow me to say that I personally believe that the digital space is actually not a temporary container anymore. I think it really is the way that people are living. It's actually become just a new landscape of life for many people. And so I would say that I hope that what I share today can become just a regular part of your ministry model and not just for this season. So first things first, so I have the great privilege of leading our faith-based partnership work at Facebook. As I said, though, I'm also a co-pastor. And so the work that I'm doing has personal relevance. Not only am I working with churches and mosques and synagogues and more across the world, but I bring the practices that I share with others to my local church. So what I'm going to share with you today is not just high level and abstract. It really is how we function. So let me first say this. Faith, we all know this, but faith extends beyond the weekend. So there are a lot of people who have said, you know, how do I stream, you know, Friday prayers, or how do I stream our service on Sunday? But the truth is that's only maybe at most, you know, 60 minutes out of the week, right? But there's 168 hours in the week. So people of faith are gathering around the world every day for prayer, study, fellowship, outside of the four walls of the building. So what I want you to do is I want you to think about your Facebook presence like it's your online house of worship. And I want to give this metaphor because I think it's going to be helpful when I get into the different products I'm going to discuss. So imagine your Facebook presence as a house where your page, it's really your front porch. It's the place where you share information about, you know, your events, or perhaps you share, you know, snippets from a message that you recently gave. It's the place where you house, you know, video content. People can come up to your page. They can see your information. It's a public surface, just like they can see your front porch. But a house that only has a front porch is more or less like a movie set. Like there's not really much to it. So if it's your online house, you also want to have a living room. You want to have a place that you can invite people into where you can actually have conversations and build relationships. And that becomes Facebook groups. So you have your front porch, which is your page. You have your living room, which is your group. But between your porch and your living room, there's a door. And so Facebook Live becomes the door. It becomes the space that people can walk through. And you want to have a group on the other side of that so that people can connect outside of the live stream. So I'm going to talk about that in detail. So we have multiple tools to help you build your house of worship online, and I'm going to go through each of them. This is not all of the tools. It would literally take days to go through all of the tools. But if you want to create what I call a faith experience, which means an opportunity for people to deepen their faith, to connect with one another throughout the week, these are the primary products you want to use. So Pages, Live, Groups, and Units. And we're going to talk about these in detail. So as I said, your Facebook page is like your online front porch. It's fully public, okay? So anybody can find your page on Facebook. Your page really helps you increase your reach. Because it's fully public, anybody can follow your page. They let your followers know, what your community is up to. You can keep your members interested and engaged with information and updates, etc. And because it's a way to build your reach, you should start by inviting your current members to like your page in order to establish credibility. So if you don't already have a page, you can set one up in about 5 minutes. And then you just invite people to like it, people who are your Facebook friends. And of course, that already assumes that you are on Facebook, which I hope that you are. But if you're not, you can join really quickly too, so don't fret. But you can invite your friends. They can invite their friends to like your page. It establishes credibility, builds your reputation, and just helps to spread the word about your institution. A few tips and tricks to keep in mind with your page. Always think mobile first, because what we know is that the majority of people are experiencing Facebook through their phone. Yes, you can access it on a desktop computer or a laptop, but before you post a photograph or video or anything on your page, you just want to take a look at it on your mobile device to make sure that the main subject is clear. I've seen many instances where a post will have really, really tiny text, or it'll be a whole lot of images and it gets a little confusing. So you just want it to be really clear. Second, this is really important. Engage with your followers. You want to respond to their comments, their questions, and their messages in a timely manner. So high level, the way that the algorithm works right now is it really focuses on engagement. So what that means is if you make a post and you want people to see that post, it's important that the people who see the post actually like it or comment on it or share it or tag their friends in it. And when they do that, you also want to respond to them. So you want to say, hey, thank you for that question. Here's some additional insight, or thank you for tagging this person. Let us know what questions you have, because the more activity that the algorithm picks up on a post, the further it's going to get distributed. So you want to make sure that there's engagement. Thirdly, and I'm going to talk about this in a moment, you want to use your page as a gateway to build community. And this is where linking a Facebook group to your page and inviting your page followers to join and start discussions becomes really important. So again, think of your page as your front porch, all right? So that's step one. Now, once you get past the page, that's where you want to start to think about how to use Facebook Live, all right? And Facebook Live on your page becomes that door to open up. Live has really, really good organic reach, which means when you go live, the probability that people who like your page are going to see it is much higher than they would see just a regular post that you would make, all right? So Live helps you to engage your audience by streaming events and gatherings. People can actually watch from their phone or their computer or a connected TV. And then there are a lot of interactive features that can be used to engage with your audience, either on your page or in your group. And I'll talk about going live in your group in a little bit. But Live helps you to engage your audience. Again, it's the open door. You can start promoting the live ahead of time. You can actually schedule a live, which is great. So if you have, Friday prayers at, 6 p.m., you can schedule that a week ahead of time. You can schedule it a couple days ahead of time. And what it does is it actually creates a module on your page where people can choose to get notified when you go live. And so that's a great way to increase the visibility. Now, while you're live, this is something I recommend, especially for faith leaders. This is really important. I can speak to this as a preacher. I know sometimes, I have my sermon ready and, I'm ready to dive into it and I'm ready to preach. The good thing about live is that you can actually see people as they join. And it becomes a great way to connect with people. So if somebody joins, you can say, hey, Sarah, thank you so much for joining. It's great to see you. You see somebody else join. Hey, Bill, so good to see you. Thank you for joining. It becomes a great way to invite people into the conversation. A few tips and tricks here too is, again, engage your audience. Invite them to share the live stream on their own pages and groups and profiles, and you can do the same thing. You can share your live stream to your pages, groups, or profiles that you manage. And again, just verbally encourage people to do the same thing. One of the things my husband and I will do is periodically as we're teaching, we'll say, hey, if you're finding this to be helpful, why don't you go ahead and share it so that your network will also see, and that increases reach. You can also build your reach through a really cool feature called cross-posting. So let's say you're an umbrella organization. Let's say you have multiple locations, or maybe you're a part of an association and you all want to support each other. I think that this organization is a perfect example. Cross-posting allows a live stream to occur on multiple pages simultaneously. So you just go into your page settings and there's a cross-posting tab there. You just click on that and you can identify the pages that you want to set up a cross-posting relationship with, so that when you go live or they go live, it'll automatically post on your pages. And this is super cool because it aggregates the views. So let's say one page has 1,000 followers, another page has 10,000 followers. Well, now you have access to 11,000 followers combined because it aggregates them. Third, building community is really, really easy with live, because watch parties can be scheduled, and this enables people to watch your video together. So as an example, and I think this is Sheikh, what you said earlier was so powerful about how the Muslim faith started in the home. I thought that was so interesting because what watch parties allow you to do is, let's say you go live and you have prayers. Well, the families can schedule watch parties so that the families are watching you together, not in one big group, but together as a family. It's really, really cool. So talking about groups, this is the product that to me is so critical for faith organizations. So everyone wants to go live and we all want to have our messages on live and prayers on live. But groups is really the place where I believe the faith experience can happen in a quality way. Groups help you deepen your engagement by gathering your community to a space where you can get to know them, they can get to know you, and most importantly, they can get to know each other through conversation. I like to make this distinction. So your page is an audience, and an audience is basically a population of people that are passively consuming whatever you're saying. A community is a population of people that are knit together through shared interests and mutual concern for each other. So an audience is passive, a community is active. Groups are where community happens. Groups are where you build relationships through conversation. And you can use your group to foster meaningful conversations about what matters to you and your members so that people can discover common interests and support each other. Groups is such an important opportunity right now in this season of physical distancing, where people feel isolated and alone. When you create a group, people can have conversations, they can post. We have a church group, and we consider it to be our online church campus. And so we right now are in prayer week. And so my husband and I, every day we pray. We have a post that goes up in the morning asking people for prayer requests. And at 7 p.m. every night, my husband and I go live and we pray in the group, or we'll have a member of our prayer team go live and pray in the group for the prayer requests that were made. And then people just feel helped. They feel like they're part of a connected community. A few tips and tricks here. You want to think about your group truly as your digital church or mosque or synagogue. You want to think about it as your digital temple, the digital place where people are gathering. And because it becomes that digital online house of worship, you want to make people feel welcome. So when you have new members join, you want to generate a welcome post. And this is a feature that is automatically available in groups. It'll auto tag the last 100 people that joined your group, and it'll provide a welcome message. And when it tags them, those people get a notification that they were tagged in a post in your group, which makes them come back to the group. And of course, everyone's welcoming them, and it just makes them feel really good. You want to connect members to each other. This is something that we love to do on our online church community is we invite members, hey, share where you live, what are your hobbies, and any other information that people can know about them. And as we see similarities between people, we just tag them. We'll say, hey, we saw that you like fishing. These 3 people also like fishing too. And next thing you know, now you've got people that have relationships.
David Butterworth.
Join the meeting.
Thirdly, think about yourself in a group as the host of the group. All right. So whereas the page is where you might make statements, the group is where you want to ask questions because you want to facilitate conversation and you want people to feel like they're a part of something bigger. Now, this last product that I'm going to go over before I talk a little bit about how to deal with groups is learning units. I think this is probably the most powerful tool available for what I consider to be discipleship. And when I use the word discipleship, of course, I think about it from the Christian lens, but I think it has applicability across faiths, which is it's the relational maturation of your faith. So it's what happens when people come together and learn together and grow together. Learning units really provides such an incredible platform for discipleship. Units help you keep your community learning. They're like education modules, great tool to help you organize and share content and resources. Group members can actually mark the completion of their units, and the completion rate gets tracked within group insights. So units you can use to onboard new members, train community leadership teams, hold group studies, keep content organized. The way that we use units in our church group is if my husband preached or if I preached, we'll actually break our message down into maybe 3 or 4 parts, and we'll create learning units so that people can take each module of the message sequentially. You can also use units for group studies. So let's say there's, you want to do a unit on teaching people how to pray, or you want to do a unit on a certain, passage in the Quran or in the Torah or in the Bible. Like you can create units to help people learn together. So it's a really powerful feature. As I said, a few tips: segment your teachings into parts so that people can actually follow up and review the messages. And then encourage people to complete them, because you'll see in the insights who has actually completed the units. Let's say it's a 3 or 4 part unit. You can actually see who completed them, and you can see the people who didn't complete them and where they stopped, which gives you the ability to just reach out to them and say, hey, brother so-and-so, sister so-and-so, it was awesome to know that you've made this much progress. Keep going. We're really proud of you. You can also arrange content around themes. So everything doesn't have to be, theological or doctrinal. It could be local recommendations, recipes, resources, member spotlights. You can make it fun. So just really quick, and I probably only have 2 more minutes, I wanted to provide some very tangible examples of how to use groups and how I've seen groups being used. So again, groups are like your living room, okay? One of the things that I think works really well is just doing a verse of the day or passage of the day in the mornings to kind of kick off the group. And most of my examples are from churches, just because that's many of the groups I work with. But you can take a passage of scripture and just start the day, something encouraging in the group, so people can actually start their day with some sacred text as a meditation point. This is an example that I wanted to share because I think it really speaks to the power of community. So this young man, he posted, you know, please pray for my friend Amber. She's thinking about taking her life. Something very, very serious. Now, in most contexts, let's say that the synagogue was open, all right? So somebody would come in and maybe that's their prayer request. Maybe they would share it with the rabbi. Maybe there would be a card that they would write it on and somebody would pray and that would be great. But that would be one person. In this instance, there are 350 comments from people letting this guy know you're not alone. We're praying for you. We're praying for her. And it just really builds the sense of community and encouragement when people are feeling isolated. And I think this is exactly what's happening now. You can also create events in groups. If people want to, you know, do a lightweight Zoom meetup, or, you know, hey, let's get together and have tea over Zoom. We'll do it on this day at this time. People can do that in the group. I just wanted to show you an example of how you can actually link groups together. So let's say you have your principal organizational group, but then maybe you have subgroups for women, for men, for youth, for people who like to sew, for people who, you know, want to have a prayer group. You can link them together so people can see them all in the same space. Something that we will do at our church is we'll use polling in groups just to see like what's on people's minds. So once we finish a unit, we might ask, hey, what topics of these 3 or 4 options would you like us to cover next? So polls is also a great tool. And then, as I mentioned, my husband and I will go live in the group just to talk about, you know, whatever subject is on our hearts or whatever we just taught about over the weekend. And again, we're doing prayer week now, so we're going live daily in the group. So that's everything I had prepared. I wanted to just give you visibility to the bottom link, facebook.com/community/faith, because that is the Faith on Facebook resource hub. There is a toolkit there that goes into all the products that I just named in great detail. And if you would like to apply to become a registered nonprofit on Facebook so that you can actually do donations on your live stream, there's a link there so that you can apply for that. Once you become onboarded as a nonprofit, you will be able to add a donate button on your page as well as on your live stream. So when you are going live, you can encourage people to give, whether it's, you know, tithes or offerings or whatever it might be. You can encourage people to give. But yes, the Faith on Facebook toolkit has so much more detail than I just covered. I wanted to provide a high level for you, and I'm happy to take questions.
Great. Thank you so much for that kind of whistle-stop tour. That's a really kind of rich discussion coming through on the chat, which I know people are finding useful. Someone's asked if we could save some of that. So we will save some of the links and info on that and be able to share it with you at a later point. Lots of questions that are obviously non-Facebook related. It's a reminder to you that this is, obviously this is a call with Facebook. So the majority of the kind of tech things that we're thinking about are related to that. There will be other further calls that citizens will be hosting to think about other platforms and other questions. This is obviously the first in a series. So I thought maybe the way that we kind of construct these questions is perhaps we start with some of the questions that relate to Nona's presentation there about the technical things around Facebook and how you use it. And then we can move on to some of the other kind of more general questions that are quite interesting that people have asked. So Juliet, do you want to pick up on a couple of the technical questions?
Yeah, sure. So we're going to do our best at inviting you to ask your own question. We're going to see how this goes. But James Lang, you asked a good question about scheduling. James, if you can put your hand up, then one of the admins can unmute you, potentially. And
I've already been unmuted.
Question yourself. Hi, James. You asked a question about Yeah, about scheduling. What was that question?
Yeah, so Anona was talking about you can schedule a meeting in advance, say your Friday prayers at a certain time, whatever. Is it also possible to schedule a recurring meeting, so every week at a certain time, so every Sunday at 10 a.m., for example, got our church service? Can that be a recurring thing, or do we have to put it in again each time you have a new service?
This is a good question. I know that the live video team is building something called Live Producer, which I believe will let you schedule something for the same time each week. Because I remember when I was looking at the design, it asked for the frequency of the video. So I don't know that it's available yet, but I do know that if it's not, that they are building it.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. And there was another question. I mean, this comes up a lot for us, questions about GDPR. Martin, Paul, you had a question about that. Do you want to wave and we can unmute you and you can ask it yourself?
Hi. Hi there.
Hi, Martin.
Okay, hi. Yeah, when you were talking about the groups being a great place to share community news and inviting people to share stuff about themselves and their location, that's absolutely not allowed under our rules and safeguarding rules. And I see somebody has posted some stuff about Church of England guidance around that. Just like to comment on that. I kind of, obviously, people sharing very personal information about where they live is not a very good idea, but also personal information about their situation, about what they're feeling about things, all that kind of stuff.
This is a great question. I actually would probably have to defer to George if he can answer, because I'm not a GDPR expert.
Yeah, I think there's probably two chunks of this. There's GDPR and there's information law, and then there is safeguarding, how to keep people safe and operate in a way that reduces harm. I think what I would say is on the latter, to start there, is that probably we are the last kind of generation of people who will even talk about online and offline as if they are different. You know, 100 years ago, people didn't ask their parents whether they met through letter or in person. Like, it was just a letter, it was a medium of communication. So I think when you think about how to make sure that your online spaces are as safe as your offline ones, that's where there's a real opportunity for faith communities to leverage their existing expertise and understanding to bring that to bear in an online space. So the principles that you would apply in your congregation, like if someone shows up on a Sunday looking really, really run down and vulnerable, or if they make a significant disclosure to a member of your pastoral team, those same principles you apply to a digital space. So you have designated points of contact. You can turn on things like post approval, which would mean that people have to, that a member of your admin team has to approve the posts that get posted. So if you have a group where you see that there's a large number of disclosures of things like suicidal intent, you might want to turn on post approval so that those posts get caught before they are posted into the group, and then a member of your team can reach out and do the kind of outbound you would normally do in your congregational setting. So I think leverage your kind of existing expertise in safeguarding, bring that to bear in the use of digital tools, kind of conscientiously and effectively. There is a lot of nuance in each of the different functionalities known as described. It enables you to prevent harm. On the second front, which is around like information, Facebook's terms of use are kind of very robust and conform with GDPR and all other kind of statutory regulations. So what people can do in the product is legal in terms of the information that they're choosing to share. That's contained within the terms of service that everyone participates in Facebook using.
Great, thanks, George. We've got a question from Joanna about to do with Zoom and live streaming and making things more engaging. Joanna, are we able to unmute you and get that question?
Yep, sure. Yeah, so we live stream quite a lot of things from Zoom onto Facebook, but I think part of the issue is they all kind of look the same. If it's a Zoom call, that, you know, there's no difference in look between like a prayer service or a learning service or something like that. And so I was wondering if there's kind of any way to make that look more engaging, especially if someone's sort of scrolling through our page and they're just seeing all the same kind of videos coming up.
So this is a good question. The answer is yes. I've seen I've actually seen a few Zoom calls where like the background was different and it was like animated. There's all the stuff going on. I personally have no idea how they're doing that awesomeness. So I would just recommend just doing a simple internet search about like how to make Zoom backgrounds more animated, because yes, it is possible. I just don't know how to do it, but I've seen it and it's really, really cool.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Great. We've also got a question from John Clifton about cross-posting. So, John.
Hi. With the cross-posting, is there an advantage with the organic reach when you cross-post? Just for the last couple of Sundays, the first Sunday we did cross post, and some people just got confused because there were multiple feeds. So one person was commenting on one and wondering why no one was responding. It was because everybody else was on a different feed. So the second week we just shared that kind of the main feed, and that kind of addressed that comments issue, and we didn't see a massive difference with the organic reach. So I'm just wondering, but it's not a very big sample size, so we can't really compare 2 weeks. So interested to know whether there's an advantage with cross posting.
Well, so this is a good question. And first of all, let me say your background with the books is just so impressive. I'm a huge reader. So I was looking at all the books. And I was like, ooh. But yeah, so the thing about cross-posting, there's automatically enhanced distribution on video, just automatically, because it's ranked pretty high algorithmically. But in terms of cross-posting, I think I don't have the specific answer to that, but what I will say is just numerically, because you're cross-posting across pages that have additional followers, you're going to just broaden your reach automatically. Now, whether or not the algorithm like adds a little more to cross-posting, I don't know, but I do know that cross-posting just gives you a bigger audience for sure.
Not on the same point, but related. You'll remember Nona's guidance earlier about thinking for mobile first, particularly when you're doing video content. Over 90% of video content on Facebook is consumed via mobile. So that basically means shooting vertically, ideally using a smartphone, or when you're using a still image, looking for something more like one-to-one than a traditional kind of broad wide angle image, because that's just not going to use as much of the screen. It's not going to be anywhere near as engaging for folk.
That's great, thank you. There's another question here. So somebody called Nick, you asked a question about music, and I've really appreciated that the conversation we've had has been a bit about kind of what we do in our worship services. I'm very conscious of the point that was raised earlier about the fact we have 168 hours, in a week, and the worship service is perhaps only for a couple of those hours. But I'm pretty sure that for many of us, a question about the use of music is quite a key one. So Nick, do you want to raise your hand and ask your question then?
Yeah, sure. Hi there. So my question is, if I was to do a live stream service, and at a point in that I wanted to play some music that would be copyrighted as a worship track, for example, am I allowed to do this? I've seen conflicting advice. I thought I saw something from the Church of England that says Facebook has some sort of PRS type license that covers us, but when I searched Google, I found lots of posts about Facebook sort of monitoring this and cutting off live stream feeds if they detect copyright music. So what's the situation now?
Thank you for this question, because this is an issue that I am actively working on. It's a very complex, nuanced issue. What essentially has happened is there are labels, record labels, there are publishers who have determined that they do not want Facebook to essentially become a music streaming service, which makes sense because you have these other services where they're monetized and they're getting paid. And so what has happened is, in order to be able to allow for any music to be on the platform, we've had to agree to certain time limitations for music, which has caused some live streams to be muted. And because of that, especially for churches, that has created a lot of anxiety. Right now, we are actively working with licensing organizations for worship music to try to determine how can we make sure that those organizations that do hold license, especially streaming licenses, are able to stream their worship services without interruption. Having said that, that's an ongoing conversation. What we're trying to do now is we're also trying to figure out, because we know that most of this worship music is coming on pages that are classified as spiritual or religious, is there a way for us to almost like exempt those pages? And so it's a complex issue, but it's in flight. What I've been telling people from an advice standpoint is what gets pulled is when the sound pattern essentially mirrors that of a published work of music. So sometimes it happens if you're using a track, or if your musicians are really, really good and they play it exactly like the published recording. If you can do almost like a little slightly different arrangement, that's a way around it, because it's only going to flag what sounds exactly like what's been published. So for now, the workaround really is just having a little bit of a different arrangement while we're working on these complex licensing issues in the background.
Great. I think Deborah had a question. Deborah, I think it's student Rabbi Deborah from earlier. So it'd be really good to hear your question, Deborah.
I can't remember if I had a question. I'm going to assume that I don't have a question right now and let somebody else ask, because I have to look for it in the stream and I don't want to waste people's time doing that.
Well, I guess one of the other things that we've sort of got about seven more minutes left for questions. One of the other big things that was coming up was about was to do with people's ability to be able to connect online in the first place. And so there are a few people who commented on that, and I just wondered it might be worth bringing in some of those people to hear a bit about that, and also how you're thinking about bringing people perhaps who are struggling with the technological side into these kind of conversations. So have you got there, Juliet, some of those people who were commenting on that?
Oh, bear with me a minute.
I think Sarah, actually. Sarah was one of them, spelled Sarah.
Yeah, I think Sarah, you were involved in a conversation in the chat and perhaps answered some of that.
Do you want to say something about that?
No. No, Sarah's not there. So there were some questions yet about the divide, really, about those who have access to online capabilities and not. Is there anyone who particularly wants to ask a question around that? If you just want to wave, then we'll try and unmute one of you about that. There's a couple of participants have raised their hand.
I'm here now.
Hey, welcome, Sarah. Do you want to ask your
Sorry,
question?
I'd crashed slightly, which is ironic. Our congregation in Coggershall is quite an elderly congregation, and although some of them are very good at using Facebook, a lot of them aren't so good. Most people are able to access our website. So with limitations on what we can actually hand deliver to people, we have been producing an actual printable copy of a service that's going to be live streamed or broadcast on Facebook, and so people can either follow along with it if they've got it, or they have the service that has been happening that they can engage with in their own home. It's not brilliant, isn't it? There's not a sense of being present at the same time as other people, but for those who just can't access to technology, or for whom the rural broadband is prohibitive of streaming video with any sense to it, that seems to be working. And we haven't yet tried what a London friend of mine is doing, which is recording podcasts or sermons for people to just phone up and listen to, which is another interesting way.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to see how different people are kind of leaning into this, and the different responses from My own church is doing Zoom calls, and finding Zoom calls alongside WhatsApp groups is working really well. To others who are Facebook live streaming, to others who are doing podcasts or streaming on YouTube. So there's obviously lots of different ways that people are thinking about it and exploring it, and a lot of that is in the chat. I want to be really good to get a sense from you, Noura. I know you had something to say and had your hand up earlier about kind of people's access to this. So Noura, is there anything you wanted to ask or add on this particular question?
Okay. No, thank you so much. I have a question for Nona, and thanks to her for that wonderful presentation. What I want to know is that what help can we get from Facebook to deal with fake news promoting hate? You know, that's my first question. And then the second question is, as you know very well, many faith groups have shut their doors, which means frontline services have been shut. You said digital is not temporary. So how can we maintain this badly needed service through Facebook, which respect confidentiality? Thank you so much.
Thank you for those questions. I think the first question in terms of hate speech is one that deals with integrity, and that's something that the company has invested a lot in, which is proactively removing that from the platform. It's definitely not perfect at all, but I can tell you with certainty that that is high priority for the company. I think, George, getting back to the safeguarding work that you've been doing, is there anything you'd like to add there? Because I think this is such a high priority for the company that it's never going to be perfect, but it's definitely something that that everyone's very aware of and working on.
So I think the question was about how faith communities can continue to offer and deliver and support direct frontline services. So I think there's a couple of different ways. That my experience of working with many of you on this call is that the ways in which you did this normally are, number one, you offer kind of human resources, you offer people towards efforts that you think are making a difference. Number two, you offer money. And number three, sometimes you do them yourselves. So in terms of offering people, I think there's just, there's this whole challenge around what that looks like in a time of social distancing. I think the charities themselves are working pretty hard to work out how to adapt their models so they're not so labor intensive, or at least can be done by people in ways that are safe. We see on Facebook at the moment an enormous mobilization of well over 2 million people in COVID-19 mutual aid groups. It's something we've been kind of supporting to scale, but the challenge has been how to integrate them with traditional voluntary organizations so that the efforts are safer and more impactful. So I don't think there are any kind of simple answers on the human resources. On the financial resources, I do think this is where Nona's point about how to integrate donation functions into lives becomes particularly important, because obviously your ability as communities to generate income and then to put it to work in the world depends on your ability to raise it. So I would encourage you, I think almost all UK faith organisations are already registered charities. Those charities can very easily get verified as such on Facebook. And at that point, you get access to a whole suite of different donation functions, including a donate through the live functionality. So that's a way you can continue to generate kind of money at this time. So I hope that gets into it a little bit.
Great. We're sort of running out of time here. We've got a few minutes left just to close up, but just to thank George and Nona for your input. We're really grateful for your time and also the ongoing relationship with you, George, and Facebook. And I'm sure there are other creative ways that we can continue to partner together. Yeah. So show your a round of appreciation by putting your clap on in terms of where your reactions are. And as I said earlier, obviously, just a reminder that this was the first of several conversations that we want to start. And I hope that this has been really useful. We're aware that obviously Facebook is one of many tools. And I hope that that's just began to help you think imaginatively about how do you do this technological side of it. How do we ensure, I think the questions around inclusion and how we're including people as part of that are really good, and perhaps we can pick some of those up. And it would be really good to hear from you in the chat now about what else would you find helpful if we were going to do another one of these calls. What kind of questions would you have? What kind of conversations would you want to have? What kind of people would you want us to get in to this to help you do what you're doing better? Because some of you are already doing an incredible job. as Juliet said at the beginning, obviously the role of citizens is to help you to strengthen your own institution. We absolutely believe in civil society, and we want to help you do that by hosting these conversations. But also have those conversations locally, because what we haven't been able to do today, I suppose, is talk amongst ourselves and kind of separate into groups. But maybe go back to your borough alliance, your community organiser, and think through that and how you might do it. The second thing that we do, obviously, is we're about the development of leaders and thinking about how do we locally, through our alliances, tackle the COVID-19 crisis? How are we at the front line ensuring that we're working together and organising for social justice? And obviously, thirdly, and really important, we've been hearing some of the really heart-wrenching stories of people who are affected by this crisis, and as an organisation are thinking about what's our role to play to ensure that we're holding local authorities and government to account for, you know, to do with insecure working and low wages, to do with people who have no recourse to public funds or are migrants, and also the tsunami of mental health issues that I think are going to come out of this particular crisis. And so if you want to be involved in those things, then do put your email in the chat. We'll try and make sure that you're included in that. If you're not a member of Citizens, obviously we'd love you to join. One of the things that has been brought up that I'm aware of is lots of people have talked about mental health, and we've actually got a relationship with some mental health partners, and it might be fortuitous that actually the next one of these conversations could be, how are you thinking about the mental health of your parishioners? What's out there in terms of resources you can get, and how can you encourage other people to think about that as well? So if that's something that you think would be useful, perhaps put in the chat, put a thumbs up if you think that would be helpful. But thanks very much for your time and energy today. We've appreciated all of you being here, and I'll leave it for Juliet to just finish up.
Yeah, so it has been really good just to connect up. For me, I think one of the key words at this time is connect. In the midst of all the challenges that we're facing, we need to connect, find ways to connect people and connect ourselves with others as much as we can. And as was said, this is really going to be the first of several opportunities to meet like this. There are other topics that we could talk about, like those who are not online so much and how we can address that, the mental health challenges, like Pete has said. So do please put in the chat box any ideas. And you know, we will be contacting you with some follow-up resources, and also we'll let you know the date of any future gathering of this. But I think we do want to say thank you to those that have contributed today. So thank you so much to Student Rabbi Deborah, to Bishop Roger and Sheikh Nuru Mohammed for being with us and sharing their wisdom. Thank you to the guys from Facebook who have shared their insights for us today. Thank you to all of you for participating, for all the wonderful questions and comments that have been made in the chat box, like just real wisdom in that place as well. And thank you to the tech people who have helped to make this happen today, which is really good. There's a group of leaders who've really kind of been behind putting this together. That's included Alison Webster, Andy Griffiths, Father Sam Dennis, Mike Comore, Martin Paul, and others as well. So thank you for those of you who've kind of initiated that. If some of you are really interested in kind of taking this forward, then do get in touch with your community organiser and put yourself forward, because we certainly like to build in the capacity of this as well. As we said also earlier, this has been recorded, so we'll share that in the follow-up email that we send to you as well. So once again, thank you so much for being part of this, and well done for all that you're doing. Hopefully together we can continue to build civil society so that we can respond as best as we can to the current crisis that we're in, and continue to build opportunities to learn and to grow and to support one another through this. So thanks for being with us today. Hopefully we'll see you again another time. Take care. Goodbye.
Bye.